Hello, I'm Dr. Peter Carter. I'm director of the Climate Emergency Institute, and I'm going to talk about what I'm talk about more than anything else, which is global climate disruption. But I'm going to talk about the part that I like the most, which is the solutions. We have known for at least 25 years that we have all the solutions developed that we can put into place to stop global surface heating, stop the oceans declining with heating and acidification, and stop all the damage that we're doing to the planet with our greenhouse gas emissions. We've known it a long time. Several UN Secretary Generals have reminded us of this, but still, thanks to our governments and the fossil fuel industries and to the big investment banking corporations that finance those industries, we are now in a dire climate emergency. It was a very interesting exercise when I co-authored this book called Unprecedented Crime, Climate Science Denial, and this is why I'm showing the book, and Game Changers for Survival. So we found that most of the book ended up being explaining the many solutions that we have immediately available for global climate disruption and ocean disruption. Talking about solutions or responses to the dire climate emergency and oceans emergency that we're in today, which is going to get worse. Talking about what each one of us individually can do brings in our own personal and family economics. And this idea was a brilliant idea which was started several years ago by 350.org, and it was called Divest. But divesting, as well as being applied to pension funds, etc., which hold vast, huge amounts of fossil fuel money, that divestment needs to be applied to us as individuals, and we need to revest. It's a very simple thing to do. Go to your bank or your accountant or your investment advisor and tell them you want to know if, and you will do, if and how much of your investment you have, how much of your money you have in the fossil fuel industry, which is destroying the future for your family. How much in the fossil fuel industry. And then you need to instruct them, take all that money and put all that money, no matter how small or big it is, into the clean renewable energy industry. Because when you do that, you're helping to create a future for your family. And that brings us to the number one solution without which the other solutions are not going to save our planet, without which the other solutions are going to leave our family with a disastrous planet in rapid decline and no future. Just think about this for a minute. When I was a young man, the future was automatically great. I mean, we didn't actually have to think about it. We just knew it was great. Everything was getting better and better and better. When I was a teenager, the Prime Minister of Britain won another election on the slogan, "You've never had it so good." I was in England, and when I moved to Canada, I believed that this was going to be a fabulous future for me, because Canada was this place of no limits, of no frontiers, you know. The Great Lakes, you know, they were vast. Nothing could, you know, despoil the Great Lakes, and the forests went on forever, and the wildlife, oh my God, you know. Well, it's not like that anywhere now. Wherever you live, just imagine, you're a young person or you're a student, and you don't want to think about the future, because the future is a place that you don't know about. It's a place that definitely is not certain, and you're getting the impression that it's not a very nice place. You know, just think about what that would be like for our young people in planning their future life. So the economics has to be changed. Amongst the protesters for a few years, I've noticed the slogan, "Change the system, not the climate." We can't save our planet unless the economic system is changed. I'm reminded about this because of my late, excellent, good friend who died very recently, Stuart Scott. Stuart Scott gave up his work in business because he realized how bad the climate change situation was, and he realized that if nothing was done about it, we would be destroying our planet. When I was talking to him about solutions and problems, he would also at the end remind me, you know, it's the economics, Peter. The economics has to be changed. We have to change the GDP. We have to change how the accounting is projected. We have to change how we invest. So we do have to do that, and we've known it for decades and decades and decades. There have been so many great books on alternative economics. Well, I always realized that really they weren't alternatives. They were the economics we had to switch to, which we could live by. So we have these alternative economics all planned out, all described in great detail. We know how much ecosystem services from an intact, healthy nature are worth in economic terms now. And there have been attempts by some countries to modify their GDP. But still, the economics is based on this. It was made clear to us in 2006 by the UK Stern Commission. It was based on the provision of unlimited goods and services from a limited resource base, and that's nature. So nature is not accounted for in our economics, and hence nature gets trashed. Nature is treated by the corporations, investors, and the banks as what they call an externality. That's just their way of saying, we're not going to bring nature into our plans or deliberations or accounting at all. We will carry on with our economics, with our market economics, with economic globalization, as if the natural world doesn't exist. As if we can continue to pollute our rivers and lakes, pour plastics and chemical toxins. Nature doesn't exist, so pollinating bees and birds don't exist for our economy, for our economics. And so we are having toxic pesticides still poured over our fields. Rachel Carson would turn in her grave, bless her, if she knew that the advice that she gave so long ago, decades ago, on pesticides, herbicides, was being completely ignored. So we have what has been called a perverse, irrational economics. And that's what we run our world by. And we have known this, as I say, forever. But one of the things that we have to take to our governments, hold our governments accounted for, and compel our governments to change is to change the economic system. Change the economic system, which is an economics based on life. Ecology years ago used to be called nature's economy. I read that book long ago and I thought, now, isn't that interesting? There actually is only one economy, and that's nature. Any other economy is within that economy. So when we're doing our economics, we should be talking about nature's economics. Because if we include nature, then we include future generations. And that's something else that we don't include in our economics, and that's something else which has to be put right. Future generations don't have a place in our economic deliberations and plans. future generations specifically have no human rights and no economic rights. According to our system, this is not the same with other systems, the indigenous peoples around the world. Future generations, the health of future generations and the health of their planet is a priority for their deliberations and planning. But we say future generations don't matter. So they're not in our economics. And today, as I've described, we are leaving the future generations with a pretty dismal looking future. How do we implement nature's economy? How do we implement an economics for life, for healthy life, for all future generations? For 7 generations, as the indigenous people of North America put it. How do we do that? Well, we have to work out the formulas, we have to change the numbers, we have to include ecosystem services, but we also have to regulate. In my lifetime and involvement with environmental health protection policy, I have seen progressive deregulation. Deregulation of our regulations that were designed and implemented to at least prevent the worst of our economic damages and the worst of our economic caused disasters. The banks, particularly in the United States, have progressively managed to get themselves deregulated. And hence we have the economic disaster of 2008 and 2009, in which trillions, many trillions of dollars were virtually taken by the banks while people lost their homes and their livelihoods. We have to regulate the banks again. Governments, of course, have the power to do this, but they need the people's support to regulate the banks. But all of our big industries have to be re-regulated. They were regulated before, right? Air pollution, I was involved in. So we worked for years and years and years and years to regulate the sources of air pollution, which of course were fossil fuels. So energy companies have to be re-regulated. And that means that, and we have the process here, we have environmental health assessment, risk assessment. That means that there must not be the slightest chance of a pollution being released into the general environment, which has a potentially fatal effect on human beings. So we have regulation still of carcinogens because they're chemicals manufactured by chemical industry or produced by the chemical industry, which may kill human beings. And that's enough under our regulatory system to ban those. It took decades, but DDT was eventually banned. It took some years, but the ozone, the stratospheric ozone depleting substances, the ozone depleters as they were called, they came under regulation and they were very, very largely eliminated. So another thing that my friends tell me, my friends that have studied this in much greater detail than I have, say that you can't have a functional moral, ethical economics if you don't include corporate regulation within that economics. So that's absolutely essential as a base for the solution of global climate and oceans disruption. The story of the solutions is different. We ended up with a very different approach to tackling climate change. And the approach, in one word, is conversion. I've made this list out of all the necessary conversions in order to prevent global climate catastrophe. The list will explain how the only solution for global climate change is total 100% worldwide conversion of greenhouse gas emitting sources to non-greenhouse gas emitting sources. My main point is this is all feasible and all readily achievable, and this has been established for many years. When considering these conversions, please bear in mind that global emissions had to decline from 2020, both for the 1.5C and for the 2C limit, and they have to drop 50% from 2020 by 2030, and that's the IPCC 1.5 degree C report. This is an illustration from UNEP in the same year, 2018. Clearly, this can only be done by starting on conversions immediately. The solution to climate disruption is conversion. Total 100% conversion away from the production of goods and services that emit greenhouse gases to processes that produce the same goods and services but do not emit greenhouse gases. And the good news is that for every source of greenhouse gas emissions that leads to global surface temperature increase, increasing extreme weather events, ocean acidification, ocean deoxygenation, we have all the answers. And we've had them for a long time. The only difference when we wrote the book in 2018 was that they're very, very well developed. And it really was very nice to go into all those solutions with Elizabeth and learn about how amazing the renewable energy technology really is. And also we learned, of course, what is cutting edge, what has already been produced, you know, to the prototype phase, etc. And it's just waiting for investment, you know, to produce more and more of this better technology. The fossil fuel industry, which of course is the main source of our present destruction of our home planet, the fossil fuel industry isn't just a greenhouse gas polluter. It's an air polluter, which we've known for decades and decades and decades. And for many years I was involved in that. And the air pollution from fossil fuels kills, the latest research 2021, is it kills 10 million people a year. That is pollution. So I found myself saying years ago, the fossil fuel industry is the industry that kills today and keeps on killing forever, for as long as we use it, for as long as we burn fossil fuels for energy, which we have absolutely no need to do, absolutely no need to do. That's the situation that we have. Conversion. So it sounds like a bit of a joke, but it's not really. The number one conversion is personal conversion, right? You could call it spiritual conversion, you could call it ethical conversion, but no less a person than Pope Benedict. Some years ago, much to my surprise, I read a presentation that he gave in the UN in New York, and he said, what we need for the environmental crises that we're bringing about is an ecological conversion. And I thought, oh my God, that is so good, you know. So no big surprise that Pope Francis repeated the statement when he became Pope. We really, really do have to do that actually. Today things are so far gone, we do have to make sacrifices. Maybe decades ago, perhaps we wouldn't have had to, but we do individually and collectively have to make sacrifices now so that we are not polluting the air and atmosphere, and we're leaving our children and grandchildren at least a chance to turn this around and to go on to develop a good future. So conversion. It's no secret then that in order to stabilize atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration, in order to stop the global temperature increasing, in order to stop the ocean heating increasing, in order to stop the ocean acidifying more and more and more and more, there's only one way to do it. You have to stop burning fossil fuels. Burning less fossil fuels, however low that might be, is no good. Burning fossil fuels with greater efficiency, no matter how high that efficiency may be, is no good. You can't have a net zero burning of fossil fuels. Burning fossil fuels with improved or less carbon intensity is no good. So that's sort of where my conversion came from as to how you mitigate climate change, right? If you're burning any fossil fuels, emitting any CO2, with CO2 now, highest in 23 million years, and if you're releasing any methane, and of course the natural gas industry, we now know, inevitably emits a lot of methane, as well as burning CO2 when it's burnt, because natural gas is mainly methane, and it inevitably leaks out at the, hundreds, thousands of miles of natural gas piping that's around. So that has to stop, and it easily can. All we have to do is convert 100% to clean, non-combustion, renewable, which is everlasting energy. In actual fact, we're not there yet. We have another step to make, another energy source that has to be excluded, because the objective has to be zero combustion energy. Like I say, we cannot burn anything. So that means excluding biomass energy and biofuel energy instead of gasoline. Neither of those are zero carbon, nor are they net zero carbon. The more you look at a renewable energy future, the better it gets. Because, as I think most people know, the more you use renewable energy, the more research goes into renewable energy, and the better that energy gets. And the more you use it, the less expensive it gets. And that's a trend which is well established, which has already started, and sort of the sky's the limit in where we could take our renewable energy, as long as we're not polluting the planet with fossil fuel emissions. Because, and this is really, really important for people to understand, when you hear these great figures of renewable energy, we're using renewable energy more now for energy than we're using fossil fuels. Well, yeah, that's great, that's progress. But it's not progress unless we're not burning fossil fuels. Because as long as we're burning fossil fuels, that carbon dioxide and methane and some nitrous oxide is building up and up and up and up in the atmosphere. And it does not go away. The carbon dioxide does not go away. So the science is absolutely compelling and absolutely definite for the 100% conversion of energy into clean renewable energy and zero fossil fuel energy. More conversions. Wherever you live, if you live in a city or a town, and wherever you go, if you travel to cities and towns and overseas, you'll see new buildings. But all of those buildings will be built by concrete, steel, aluminum, and glass. Everywhere. Now, there's no worse form of building for our planet than that. Obviously, steam and aluminum require a huge amount of high energy dense power to smelt those metals. And that's where coal comes in. That's why 400 and more coal plants are being constructed and in the planning phase. We don't need to do this. There are other ways to construct apart from using steel and aluminum. So for buildings, we should be building with wood. I come from England, and there are mansions, huge mansions, beautiful, standing, Tudor mansions, all wood, all wood. And they've been standing for 500 years and more, and they're still as solid, or they seem as solid certainly as the day they were built. So we have to stop, like we have to stop fossil fuel energy, we have to stop building with concrete and steel. Now, you know, why am I laughing at concrete? Because we make concrete by burning limestone. Limestone is formed in the ocean over millions and millions and millions of years, and limestone is the way the ocean sinks carbon. I mean, really sinks carbon. I mean, takes carbon out of the atmosphere for millions and millions and millions of years. So as well as burning up the true carbon sinks in the form of coal and oil, we're making concrete where we're burning up the ocean's carbon sinks. So you burn limestone, you emit huge amounts of CO2. So that's a conversion of construction. There is a popular conversion now, I'm glad to say, which is a dietary conversion. And this was really proven in the IPCC report in 2019, the special report on land, in which they had a chapter on food security. And there they listed all the various diets, the ways of eating. So a vegan came out actually, you know, significantly the best, and next was vegetarian. We do have to go vegan. We have to convert completely off the diet that we're now on, you know, the meat-heavy, very unhealthy diet, and onto the healthiest diet there is for human health, and very definitely for the planet. And that brings us to another scientific reason why the only solution is conversion. In 2015, the IPCC fifth assessment, in headline statements, key headline statements, said that in order to stabilize at 2 degrees C at that time, because we hadn't smartened up enough to realize that 1.5 degrees C was a disastrous danger limit, they said that all of the 3 long-lasting greenhouse gas emissions, CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide, had to drop to, quote, near zero. Now look back on energy. There's only one way to get near zero on CO2. You've got to end the fossil fuel industry. You've got to convert it to the renewable energy industry. Methane, same thing. Most people are probably aware that meat is the big source of methane. And it's another reason why the Amazon is being destroyed, because eating meat is such a popular thing to do. But we cannot get methane down to near zero unless we stop eating meat. There's no way. There's no way. I thought I was doing well when I was a vegetarian, but, you know, doing the climate change science, I decided I'd better take a look at, you know, methane from the dairy industry, you know, because I'm English, I like to have my tea with cream, right? And I like to butter on my bread. Well, it was a bit shocking, and I had to quit. That's when I had to go vegan, because the dairy industry, it emits a lot of methane, a lot of methane. So we have to make that conversion. The big nut to crack with regards to climate change solutions is recognized as transport. Airplanes, ships, trucks, cars, buses, they're everywhere, right? And they are all powered by burning fossil fuels. All of our transport, everywhere we go, every mile we make, is driven by fossil fuels. Now there's this huge change from fossil fuel energized transport to electrified transport. And that seems very good because the vehicles have no tailpipes. so they're not emitting any carbon. But if those electric vehicles are not manufactured with zero carbon energy source, then they're not zero carbon. Now, I live in British Columbia, so we do have electric bikes, but we're very lucky in British Columbia because most of our energy is from hydro, as in other regions in Canada. So we have zero combustion energy from water. But that doesn't apply to the vast majority of the urban and industrialized and citified world. So most of the world, when you plug in your electric car to charge it, the electricity comes from burning coal. The projections for total automobile sales do not match with the imperative of reducing emissions 50% by 2030. This is a projection from Bloomberg, and it shows that by 2040, all kinds of electrified vehicles account for 54% of all car sales. That sounds good, but that leaves a huge increase in internal combustion engine vehicles, from 80 million in 2015 to 120 million in 2040. What we're looking at here is a massive expansion and globalization of the automobile industry. This more clearly shows the continued increase in the production and sales of internal combustion engine cars. And here is 2030, and instead of, let's say, the production of the cars dropping 50% at least by 2030, they continue to increase. The climate survival imperative is to put the use of the internal combustion engine into rapid decline. We have to switch to a means of transportation which doesn't emit greenhouse gases. And that's quite a challenge, but it certainly means switching away from the personal transportation vehicle and make it all public transport. Theoretically, then there's a possibility, because you've then got built-in efficiency, big-time built-in efficiency, because there's nothing more inefficient than the car, the individual car, the internal combustion engine. It's the worst way for moving people imaginable. Then if we have a public transport system, which is integrated, by the way, so that people can get to their work and get to their homes, then theoretically you should be able to power that with zero combustion engine, or with zero combustion energy. Another controversial issue, of course, is fission energy, nuclear fission energy. Nuclear fission is a well-recognized lowest carbon energy source. The progress with fission energy, of course, has been absolutely stymied by the people who understandably don't like the idea of nuclear energy because, you know, they know about Chernobyl and things like that. But I agree with Dr. James Hansen, who did, with another author, a very, very convincing paper some years ago, showing how many people had been killed by burning coal energy and how many people had been killed by fission energy. And of course there was no comparison, absolutely no comparison. This is the James Hansen paper that I referred to. It was published in 2013. What they did was they worked out how many deaths would have occurred had the fission energy over the period of time of 1971 to 2009, had that amount of fission energy been provided as fossil fuel energy, and that would have been mainly as coal. From that approach, they calculated that nuclear power had actually prevented a huge number of deaths, about 1.84 million air pollution related deaths, and a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions would have prevented 64 gigatons of CO2 equivalent greenhouse gas emissions that would have resulted from fossil fuel burning. Now, these numbers with respect to deaths will now be a pretty large underestimate, because the latest estimate on deaths from fossil fuel air pollution published this year is over 10 million deaths a year.
The other point that carbon specialist University of Chicago, David Archer, made in the paper.
The lifetime of fossil fuel CO2 in the atmosphere is a few centuries plus 25% that lasts essentially forever. The climatic impacts of releasing fossil fuel CO2 to the atmosphere will last longer than Stonehenge, longer than nuclear waste.
The IPCC actually came out in 2014 and said, to remove all the carbon from the atmosphere that is built up from our fossil fuel emissions will take 100,000 years.
The really big benefit with respect to fission energy is its energy density. That's the punch of energy that can be produced for a given mass of energy source. The high energy density of fission is hugely greater than the energy density of the highest energy dense fossil fuels. In smelting metals and heavy manufacturing, the choice has been between using coal or using fission. Clearly, in the dire climate emergency that we're in, as everybody acknowledges, the world has to get off coal really quickly. It'll be hard to do that without increasing fission energy in the world. A notable case recently is Germany, where due to political reasons, Germany decided to close down its fission reactors, and at the time said that its emissions would increase. And indeed, its emissions have increased, and Germany is now not going to meet its national emissions target, even though that target is nowhere near good enough for a 1.5 or even 2 degrees C global temperature increase limit.
So I don't think we're being a little bit emotional about the opposition to fission energy. We need it. And then the last thing, I suppose, is fusion energy. There's a lot of fusion experiments going on in the world. It's the holy grail of energy. Unfortunately, we don't have time, right? We don't have time. So we have to be building and rebuilding the world totally for zero combustion energy. It has to have a world rebuild. And we can do this. I mean, we've done it with cities, we've done it all over the world. But we have to do it now on a global basis, and we have to do it very fast. And that's where the comparison, the analogy of wartime mobilization comes in. How fast, when people see their future threatened, how fast they can change and completely devote all their ingenuities, right, and all their energies into one common enemy, as it is in war. Well, our enemy now is our own greenhouse gas emissions. So our enemy now actually is largely the fossil fuel industry. And we have to unite, globally unite. And that brings me to my last and most important solution. We have to globally unite, cooperate, and we have to get this huge, massive venture going. And this wasn't my idea. It was actually David Wadsell's idea back in 2006 of a Manhattan Apollo Marshall Plan, I call it. We developed not one atomic bomb, but 2 atomic bombs. And of course, you know the famous history at Los Alamos, United States Army And we did that in no time at all. It was a mission impossible to produce a bomb, an atomic bomb, the most destructive bomb that we'd ever produced, just from formulas on paper. Every single thing that they had to engineer into that bomb had to be made from scratch. Every single part of the infrastructure was new. So we know we can do that, right? We know we can get all our scientists together. We know we can upgrade our renewable energy within a year to way, way, way more powerful than the renewable energy we've got now. We know we can do that. And of course we know we can rebuild the world, right? It's labor. One thing we've got lots of on our world is labor.
There is an encouraging precedent for today's imperative to rebuild the world as a zero combustion energized world, and that is the United States Marshall Plan, which ran from 1948 to 1952. On the right you'll see the bombed out cities of Dresden and Hamburg in Germany. The Marshall Plan was an American 4-year initiative launched in 1948 for foreign aid to rebuild and help restore devastated war-torn Western Europe. The USA poured out goods, resources, and American personnel, backed up by over $13 billion, equivalent to today's $114 billion, in economic recovery programs to Western Europe. It was amazingly successful. The years 1948 to 1952 saw the fastest period of growth in European history. Industrial production increased by 33%, agricultural production substantially surpassed pre-war levels, the poverty and starvation of the immediate post-war years disappeared, and Western Europe embarked upon an unprecedented 2 decades of growth that saw standards of living increase dramatically.
We are doomed by our own greenhouse gas emissions disrupting the entire biosphere if our part of the human race doesn't smarten up and demilitarize, stop this insane rapid development of weapons. They're all doing it, right? United States, Russia, China, Britain. To deal with the greatest challenge that the human race has ever faced, that we have to stop. So I guess I started my sort of activism career naturally a long, long time ago, when we were afraid that we were going to blow ourselves up in a nuclear war, okay? And we damn nearly did a few times. So I really, really enjoyed and benefited greatly by my time in the peace movement there, you know? I remember Project Plowshares and all of these great organizations, great people. So to deal with climate change, we have to demilitarize, right? Because we have to totally cooperate. We have to unite as a human family against a common foe, even though that foe is from us in the industrialized world, that is, right? So that is an essential switch conversion to make. A conversion from a war attitude, a war economy, a war industrial production, okay, to a peace world, right? A world that runs on, its goal is, and its process is peaceable. And I remember in 1992, that was one of the Rio Earth Summit declaration principles, that it was impossible to achieve a sustainable society if we did not demilitarize. So I want to end this with 2 quotes from my good wife, Julie Johnston. One quote: when I was talking about conversion 100% off fossil fuels, she said, well, that means the burning age is over. I thought that was great. I said, that's great, you know. That's something that people can understand. The burning age is over. All kinds of burning. We've got to stop it. If you burn anything, it's going to emit carbon. And the other thing that she said when I was sort of complaining, like more people, weren't investing in, this great renewable energy, she said, well, seems to me then that one cause for unmitigated climate change is a failure of imagination. And I think that's very true. And one brilliant characteristic of human beings is their constructive imagination, right? How they can imagine better worlds and better things and better devices and better processes. So I don't think we're bringing that enough onto the climate change table. Not enough by a long, long, long shot.